I'm listening for the words that they're saying, and I'm listening for the words that they're not saying. Often we communicate more, obviously through our body, which again becomes a lot more difficult in this age where we're doing a lot more virtual meetings. But also sometimes the way people put together their sentences, etc., even though they're saying one thing, they probably mean the very opposite. And that's why it's important to just take a step back and be 100% there and listen.
Hi, I'm Sehaam Cyrene. Welcome to the Leaders Who Coach podcast. I teach leaders how to use coaching skills for influence, performance, and impact, and in the process, making you more confident in your conversations. I want to welcome you to my conversation today with Aditi Agarwal. When I first spoke with her, I was immediately taken by her calm and confident energy and how she talked about building trust with her teams, which includes her use of key performance metrics. There's lots you'll want to take note of today. Aditi is a fractional CTO and technology delivery leader who works with PE-backed and scaling organizations during periods of transformation, platform change, and execution pressure. She's previously served as Chief Technology Officer at Blue Light Card, Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, and Realife Tech, where she led global technology teams, large-scale platform rewrites, and digital growth initiatives. Now she partners with executives and boards as an embedded operator. I love that term. Helping businesses modernize legacy technology, improve their delivery effectiveness, and scale with confidence while continuing to operate at speed. Welcome, Aditi. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'd love to start by you sharing with us a bit more about your professional background and your current role.
Yes, thank you. So professionally, my background is engineering. I love solving problems and I love technology because it's very logical and it enables a lot of things. It's a very useful tool to solve a lot of problems in life. That's what got me into it. That's what keeps me in it. I started life as a hands-on developer, working on lots of different parts of the stack, doing things like DevOps, even before DevOps was officially a term, to mobile applications and backend services, etc. And very soon that progressed into leading teams because one of the biggest challenges technologists have is understanding business. And business people struggle to understand tech speak. And translating the two was very fascinating for me. Understanding what's the real problem we're trying to solve here, as opposed to focusing on a solution and then sort of engaging with the people who solve those problems best and helping them understand what that real problem we're trying to solve for is. Then, following agile practices or any delivery methods is the easy part of it, but it's that understanding and shared empathy that's harder. And that's what got me to leading teams. So my first sort of management role was at the Daily Mail Group, working with the publishing side of the newspaper, so not Mail Online, but the print newspaper, and working on a program that was launching sort of digital editions of the newspaper behind a subscription. And that is also the first place I managed a globally distributed team where we had offshore workers in India, and just ensuring that everybody was on the same page and understood the vision and understood what are we trying to achieve, by when are we trying to achieve, and what does good look like, is how I really got into this. And I must have done something right because after quite a few years of that, I moved on to sort of CTO roles in startups and then eventually scale ups and, with PE-backed businesses and publicly listed firms like the Yum Brands and Pizza Hut in particular. More recently, I've got a young family, so being a full-time CTO is quite demanding, and actually being fractional helps me do the things that I really love, which is solving problems for leaders and partnering with them, whether that is through either coaching their teams or helping them build their teams, or occasionally just holding fort while a permanent replacement is hired. And all of that helps me focus on the things that really gives me a lot of joy and helps me solve problems and deliver value whilst maintaining a little bit more of a work-life balance.
Thank you. It definitely has its pressures, and I'd love to talk about it perhaps a little later, how you're managing, balancing everything as a mum and a full-time CTO, a fractional CTO. I think A lot of our listeners will find that really valuable. Good to learn from each other. One of the things I picked up from you just now and talking to you previously is your collaborative style of leading. I'd love you to just share a little bit more about that, why it's important to you, and maybe some things that you do.
So I'm a firm believer that no matter how smart individuals are, and technology does have a lot of smart individuals, individually, we really can't achieve much because individually we're looking at problems with a singular lens and we're analyzing it that way. Equally, communication, I believe, has got three parts to it. It's sending the message, it's receiving the message, and then it's interpreting the message as it was intended. And often a lot of things get lost in translation, especially in this day and age where you rely on, we don't even email each other so much. We do like really short, quick messages on Slack. And now, as I'm finding, more and more teams just drop each other voice notes asynchronously, and you're sort of just left picking up voice notes one after the other to try and figure out where you are. And a lot of the tone and the intention, etc., gets lost. And when those things happen, getting everyone's buy-in in the same way that the original holder or setter of the vision intended is diluted. And the only sort of way, or one of the ways I find that's most effective in working around it, is by doing it collaboratively. Getting people together physically or virtually, whatever works, and saying, hey, let's understand what's the problem we're here to solve. Why do we want to solve it? What is so important about it? And hearing other people's perspectives as well. It helps them just get it off their chest. Sometimes that is enough, and that in itself removes a lot of barriers. Sometimes it just helps you build your own mental model of what is the problem that's going on here and what are the bits that you yourself as an individual have missed. And then it just puts people into that solution mode where they all sort of end up taking ownership for what we're here to do, because they've all contributed towards fleshing out the problem and potential solutions, etc. There might be some situations where working collaboratively doesn't work, and it also very much depends on the maturity of the team. And occasionally, very occasionally, you do end up with people, with a group that ends up being more detracting from the focus point, etc. And that is when, as a leader, you just need to know when to rein it in, how to rein it, how far to let the conversation go before you sort of say, right, we're going to stop it there. And if I'm convening this discussion, then I'm going to call the shots and sort of just lay out the roadmap and ask people to buy in or disagree, and ideally disagree and commit, and we move on. That just tells you, again, as a leader, where you need to have some of the difficult conversations very early on. That's why I think being collaborative unleashes a lot of this power and opens up a lot of those potential problems that you might run into in the future.
There's a few things there I just want to come back to a little bit more. One is the way that you bring people together, perhaps at the start of a project or program, and use the word, get things off their chest. So invariably there is some anxiety, isn't there, at the beginning of something coming together. You don't know your teammates. You don't know exactly what you're building. You don't know what the solution is yet. And it's quite a task to bring everyone together and align on what that needs to look like, right? How to move forward. So just that bringing people together to be, and I infer by you saying, letting people get things off their chest, you're giving them some airtime to express their concerns, to voice their opinions about different things. And that's such an important part of that onboarding experience, isn't it? And even if you think about, it may not be obvious, but it is a pathway on a change curve, right? There's a lot of unknowns. You're bringing people together who maybe don't know each other, and you still haven't defined what you're building. And so it's so critical, isn't it, to allow time for all kinds of opinions to be expressed in that space, right?
Something you said really resonated as well, which is that onboarding experience and anxiety around sometimes not even knowing who the players alongside you are. And I think that's important. It reminded me of an instance where I was working for a startup, and the founder, he wasn't technical, but what he was really good at is bringing people together and getting them to buy into his vision. And one of the exercises he did when he realized in his little company, we were probably about 10, 11 people, and a few more, like we had a day where 2, 3 new people joined the team. And he said, right, we're all going to get to know each other. And he had a whole bunch of things planned out. But even before he went into it, he said, I'm going to go around the room. Everyone needs to introduce themselves as a vegetable and why. And it suddenly lightened the mood, and suddenly everybody was like being really creative and coming up with really funny answers. And obviously, that invoked some laughter and sparked some conversations among people who knew each other very well. Um, and then suddenly, like literally after 10 minutes, everyone just felt like, okay, great, we're in this together. Even the new people were visibly so much more relaxed, going, okay, yeah, I can deal with this. And I think that's really important. It's just really important to get those cortisol levels down, the barriers down, and just help people feel I'm a part of something. That sense of belonging is very important.
Exactly, exactly. And I love the laughter piece. And it seems frivolous. And maybe some people think, oh, we haven't got time for that, or I'm uncomfortable, facilitating something like that. Really does. It's a brilliant shortcut to, as you say, lowering the stress levels, the cortisol levels, and increasing the oxytocin, like the connection hormones, right? And from there, we can be more generous from that space of connecting and feeling like we belong, even if it's just that shared 10 minutes, half an hour moment in a session. It really does move you along, propel you along in that trust building, right? And it feels safe. If we're laughing, we're generally feeling quite safe, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, again, I'm a firm believer of this, and it's true if you do the maths, right? We spend more waking hours with our colleagues than we do with our own family. And if we do that, and colleagues are relative strangers initially, why wouldn't we invest some more time? Like, these are people who eventually end up being, in certain cases, friends for life. And I've certainly got a few people from the first time I moved to the UK and I first started working. I call them my family away from family, because that's how close we've grown. We may not see each other that often, but we all know we can pick up the phone and like have a chat as you would with a family member. And that's the difference, because you're going to spend so much time. You might as well, and you're going to be invested in shared outcomes and shared visions. Let's just have some fun along the way. It just makes everything a lot more easier than always combating each other. And of course you will. In the process of delivery, you're absolutely going to have difficult conversations and disagree. If you're not, if a team's not, that's worrying. And I would actually stop and go, why isn't there some level of conflict in this team? What are we missing? But we just need to find ways. We need to find ways where we can say, right, that was work, that's behind us. Let's just be humans now.
So true. I love how you phrase that. Yes, you are sharing some really challenging times, right, on a project. And why wouldn't you develop that? And the fact that you can have a closeness or can share some laughter together means that when it comes to those difficult conversations, they're a little bit easier, right? You have some common ground together that helps you get through it, a common focus. So something else, and you just added the whole thing about if there isn't a level of conflict in there, it's that dissenting point of view. If people aren't able to express that, or you're not hearing it, then yes, alarm bells. And I'm sure we can come back to that. There was something else that you said earlier, which was about, if you're owning the meeting and you are making a judgment that maybe the session has fulfilled its purpose, but that tension is rising or things are coming up that are better handled in another way. What I loved hearing you say was just that ownership of the meeting. It's my meeting and I'm going to run it in the best way possible. And that includes noticing when maybe there's some friction between certain individuals and this group forum is not the place to explore that. But you've noted it and you will deal with it in a different way, confidentially outside of this meeting. I think that role of you being the owner of the meeting can be really misunderstood, and people feel like they either have lost control of the meeting or they don't know how to do it. But I love the confidence with which you say, it's my meeting. I'm going to run it in the best way I know possible. And that includes taking care of situations or friction or incidents that I know are better handled in a different way and not here. So yeah, just wanted to call on that. Why do you think that's so important to you?
So I think when meetings, typically when you're kicking off a project or getting a group of people together to buy into something or contribute to it something, it involves a bunch of people, 5, 10, often more. All of these people have taken time out from doing something that they could be doing, and they're there with you, contributing towards something. They're present. They're physically, emotionally, mentally present. You got to respect that. You got to respect the fact that these people are often highly paid. Their skills are highly valued, and they're now being used in what you've just convened. And as a meeting coordinator, that puts me under a good level of pressure, because now I need to be very efficient. I need to get the best out of them. I need it to be as productive as possible so that nobody leaves that meeting, or most people don't leave that meeting feeling they were better off not coming to this and doing something else. And I think if I can show them that respect, they're going to respect me. They're going to go ahead, they're going to contribute and really genuinely be there. And I get the best out of people. Again, this all goes towards building that trust. If I show people that respect, I'm going to eventually get it back as well. Again, we're humans. Even if we're colleagues and stuff, we're still humans. And we tend to give back what we get. Someone has to go first. I can always be the one who goes first.
And it's so the distinction there is you're not controlling the meeting. You're not trying to control people's behavior, but you are showing great respect for the energy, the time and the thinking that they have brought to it. And you're protecting that. You're protecting what's been built in that session.
Correct.
Between people. Beautiful. Really love that. Let's expand on that a little bit. And I'd love to hear your perspectives on managing or growing members of your team.
So I think everyone, when they similar principles, right, and similar sentiments. When they choose to work with you, they are choosing not to work with a whole bunch of other people, and they're choosing to bring your skills to a team for you. And as, again, a leader, it's our moral responsibility to ensure that they leave the team whenever they leave, whether it's during the course of a project. You want to leave people in teams and organizations better off than when they first came to you. That's value delivery, right? And I feel that pressure more as a fractional because I've got a very short window to do that influencing. So it's very important for me that I very quickly get into a place where I can actually help an individual grow. And even that individual may be even more senior to me or far more experienced than I am. And that's okay. I can still help. Just as junior staff and junior developers have always influenced me. They're my favorite people to talk to and say, reverse coaching. You tell me what you've learned and tell me what I don't know. So I think A, that's important. B, it's very important for us to quickly formalize that in some way. And I don't mean write it down and have it visible in HR systems, etc., but formalize it enough to say it needs to be a part of a regular conversation, not something that we talk about casually, not something that we talk about occasionally, but something that we weave into almost an everyday interaction. And it needs to therefore be front and center of our interactions and the work that we do for each other. Now, that might mean codifying it into OKRs. That might mean selecting a team or composing a project team based on obviously people's strengths. You can't really compose a successful project team based on what people aspire to be. They need to bring a lot to the table, and they obviously need to eat at the table as well. So you need to ensure as a leader you've got a good mix of the two, and then codify it, whether we pick it up in one-to-ones, whether we pick it up as a part of OKRs or annual objectives or whatever a company might be following as their mechanism to grow individuals. And whatever that method is, what I love to do is also ensure and agree on how would we know that we've done this, right? Either what's going to start happening once you've achieved this, or how might you start feeling once you've achieved this, or are there any metrics that might move because you as an individual or you as a team have achieved something. Let's agree on that. And then let's occasionally being probably at least once a month, if not more frequently, look at it and say, are we roughly on the right track? Do we need to focus more? Do we need to do something different? Did we just pick the wrong thing? And do we need to have a conversation all over again? We need to do that check-in.
A lovely way of describing it, because there's flexibility in that, isn't there? And you can use different tools as appropriate. But I think there's a tendency to only rely on one tool because that's the one that everyone's looking at. For example, OKRs across the company, right? But that are not always appropriate for a daily interaction, right? Or growth of an individual, because things are happening all the time, right? Between meetings, in meetings, and so on. So that, I think that's a really important consideration, is how useful is the metric, and are there other ways to do it? And what I do see at this time of year as well is an over reliance on codifying, using OKRs, performance for a team. And that puts enormous pressure on the leaders to do that. And it can feel quite overwhelming to have to do that as well across for your whole team. And I think what's lovely in what you're saying is that there is a conversation that takes place and you're involving the individuals in determining what is the best target to aim for. What is the growth here? And is it measurable in our standard way or is it measurable in another way? And just having a really intelligent conversation about it. So you're not in your head, they're not in their heads, and you're actually having a meeting of minds to determine what is the best way. And then when you check in, it's appropriate to the growth or the target or whatever that is. I think that is so important to do. And I do want to remind leaders that, the codifying is important to an extent. And I completely understand how organizations are trying to create a common system or a common language to report against, but we can do ourselves a disservice and our direct reports a disservice by sticking to that without any other flexibility and not involving them also in designing what that needs to be, right? So was there anything more that you wanted to add to that?
No, well, yes. I think, again, you need to think of that as a motivational tool. And again, an example I can give you is actually that of my 5-year-old child. We've been trying to get her to build a few habits, right? So again, if you apply it to workplace, it's no different. We're trying to build some skills in her. I won't embarrass her in the future by telling you what the skills are, but we decided as a family that she needs to build some skills, and she agreed with us that she needs help with it. And we tried a few different methods, and ultimately what landed was something as simple as a habit tracker, where you've got a very pretty chart. My husband found this, so I can't take credit for it either, where you put down what are the habits you want to track, and then you've got a little box against each of those for each day of the month. And then she just brings that to us every day saying, can you color in red or green based on whether I've done it or not? And it's amazing how motivated she feels. So she's already doing the things that we want her to do and what I try to do at workplaces as well. We do regular check-ins. We color code things and give her feedback, and she receives that feedback and she sort of says, right, okay, I'll do this thing differently tomorrow or day after or whatever. And she gets very motivated because we've done that daily check-in and there's a visual thing for her to track against. She gets very motivated and goes, oh, look how red I was there and look how green I'm getting now. It's brilliant. And I think that's fundamental. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. Something like that is always very motivating. Even for us, like I've got a habit tracker now for myself for 3 things I want to do differently. And, it's going to stick.
Very true. I do recall with my kids having a visual checklist of some kind was really motivating. And what's nice about that, it fosters independence, doesn't it, as well? It fosters autonomy and it says, you're in control of whether this is green or red, right? At the end of the day. So so true. Something I heard you say earlier was the idea that I call recontracting or recontracting, which is, you can revisit the conversation and determine if that goal is still suitable, if it's still the right goal or the metric is still the right metric. And so that is always possible. And that's why monthly may be too infrequent for someone who's on a steep learning curve, right? To check in with them. And they don't need to be long check-ins. They can be quick 10, 15-minute check-ins about how someone's getting on.
Less. Exactly, even less. Sometimes, and I've seen the most effective managers, because I'd had one person do this for me, is at the end of meetings, they were working with me on saying I wasn't being assertive enough and I wasn't saying no in enough situations. Like I knew in those situations I shouldn't say yes, but I was just struggling to say no. And they said, I'm literally giving you the goal to say no in these meetings, and I'm going to count how many times you've said no. At the end of each of those meetings we were in together, all they didn't even come have a chat, nothing. They just dropped me a note. Those were the days we emailed each other instead of, slacking each other. They just dropped me an email to say, very well done. You said no these many times and you said it well, or you could have been more assertive once in these 1 or 2 places where you weren't. Maybe just think about it. And that was enough. Within like a few weeks, we were getting more and more. And he said, I think I can stop watching you now. You got this. So it doesn't even have to be a conversation. The point is that it doesn't have to be a conversation. It's just enough. Those touch points can be anything. They just need to be frequent enough. And you just need some truth tellers in your life that'll help you grow. And again, that's really possible once that trust is built as individuals.
Yeah. Perfect illustration, right? It's just that accountability, a little nudge, a reminder, an acknowledgement of what you have done well. And we can forget how vital and important those are. And it can feel weighty to you as a leader to feel like you need to go back. You're aware that you should go back and have a conversation with someone, but actually finding ways to make that much lighter is incredibly powerful and empowering of the individual, right? Who's trying to practice a new habit or ritual in what they're doing. You're very calm. There's a great deal of confidence that comes across. And I wondered how that works for you in terms of listening to people. What are you listening for in that space?
I'm listening for the words that they're saying, and I'm listening for the words that they're not saying. Often we communicate more, obviously through our body, which again becomes a lot more difficult in this age where we're doing a lot more virtual meetings. But also sometimes the way people put together their sentences, etc., even though they're saying one thing, they probably mean the very opposite. And that's why it's important to just take a step back and be 100% there and listen. And I've been there in those one-to-ones where I've just not been in the headspace and I've said, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the best from me. So either we just do this on email or we just reschedule. And occasionally I've even had the person I'm having the one-to-one with do that to me, just saying, look, I'm not bringing my 100% self. And it's like, yeah, that's perfectly fine. I'd rather have you 100% than have you 50%. And you want to listen for the two. And you can only do that if you're calm, if you're completely focused and you don't have another sort of thing at the back of your mind or right next to you or trying to multitask. Yes, we can all multitask, but you're going to spend far more time later mopping up everything than you would by just focusing and doing one thing at a time.
I love the listening for what they say and what they don't say. There's so much that once you tune into it, right, you start to pick up. Even hesitations or body language or micro expressions can be really revealing about what someone's really feeling or thinking about a situation. And that to me is part of our role as leaders and for growing other people, because often people are not aware of what they're actually signaling. You know, their words may be very counter to what they're actually expressing in their body with their energy, right? And as leaders, you need to be able to tune into that, to be able to ask questions, to be able to inquire, like, you're saying yes, but your body language is telling me no. What's going on there? What's the difficult thought in this? What's the hesitation? What's the concern? That is, when we talk about growing people, it's growing their self-awareness as much as their capability, right, to do things. It's growing their self-awareness. And so by you being able to notice these things, you actually help them tune into their own bodies and their own way of expressing themselves and becoming more aware of what they are actually signaling, even if their words say something else.
People usually are self-aware enough to know the answer. What they don't have is a confidence to accept that that's how they're feeling. And I think just being able to catch that and put it in front of them and then say, hey, the world didn't come to an end because, you know what, I actually still got that message. And the minute I played it back to you, you said yes, that is exactly what you wanted to get across. And we can work from here, right? And what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, even if I was offended by that, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's not the end of the world. And that in itself, I think that's an important role leaders plays, is helping people get that confidence to go, even if you just say exactly what's in your mind. There are certain red lines you don't cross. For example, you don't swear, you don't get really angry and shouty and fist bangy, etc. But there's no harm in expressing what you feel and how you feel about it. And as leaders, we really need to pick that up and play it back to individuals and then show them nothing bad happened.
Right. There's something else that occurs to me in that, just in you mentioning, not swearing or not shouting. It's the anger sometimes we feel, isn't it? And can we express ourselves? Can we actually say that we're disappointed or we're anxious? Because very often that comes out just as anger, frustration, not being able to articulate ourselves, right? And if the cortisol or stress levels are high, that can completely hide in terms of our ability to express ourselves. So it is about not taking it personally and recognizing that someone just is maybe struggling with something they feel strongly about. So how can we create that safe space for them to say, to have another go at expressing that thought or that concern? And also, we're condoning the behavior, but also if it happens in a team environment, in a team meeting, we do well to protect that individual and protect the team, right? From
Yeah.
that very strong
From the
emotion.
backlash of that. Yeah.
Right, right. And so, yeah, is the responsibility and leadership, I think, really sits in this ability to flex and understand different communication styles and understand what might be going on for somebody that appears aggressive or too directive or antagonistic might actually be something that is just a difficulty of expressing themselves. And as you
100%.
say, accepting the emotion that they're feeling, right? Accepting the reality of what they're feeling and it being okay, just making it okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Even the worst of situations that I've either faced or observed or either steered a team or having to go through it myself. I think all of us have been through, and we can all think of those situations where we would rather not be. I think we always in the future look back at those moments and say, I'm so glad that moment happened because I wouldn't be the individual I am now had that not happened. And that happens in personal life as well. So it's also, again, having that maturity to know in that situation, whether you're a leader or whether you're the individual going through it with your leader, that that is a learning moment. And you're going to look back at it 2-3 years, 2-3 months, maybe even a day. And you're going to go, I'm so glad that happened. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this. So it's just accepting, it's trusting the process as well.
It's a very philosophical Zen way of seeing things for sure.
That's where the calm comes from.
Right. It's all going to be okay. It's all going to be
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. What would you say, if you don't mind sharing, what would you say was your biggest growth moment as a leader?
I've had a few, from the time when fairly early on in my career, when someone I really looked up to, someone who was one of the best managers I ever had professionally, and someone I learned from and continue to learn from even today, moved on from the business very suddenly. And I suddenly felt very unlooked after. And I went, great, if I feel unlooked after, how am I supposed to look after my own team? There's so much uncertainty, etc. So as a young sort of manager leading a team, that was very unsettling. And there was definitely a lot of personal growth moments that happened there where I went, okay, I need to still show up for my team. I still need to put my own emotions and uncertainties aside and have a strong face for the team. It's still an authentic one, and being open about what I'm not sure about, but also still being there for the team, still saying, yes, you can come talk to me. You can still share your concerns and anxieties with me, etc. So that was one. I think one of the more recent ones would be actually more connected to work. I cannot tell you which company or something because it was actually a security incident that we faced, and it was really tough because it was something I had personally never been through, and I was leading the team. I was ultimately responsible for the outcomes of it. And it was juggling a lot. And again, with a young family, that becomes hard where your time suddenly gets very stretched. You're stealing effectively from what your children and your family expect from you. And professionally, you want to still be there for the company. You still feel you've got to do a good job and you've still got to, and you want to. It's not about you got to do it. You want to do it because you feel responsible and accountable. And it's about how you then decide to prioritize and what do you do for your own mental health to say, how do I make those moments of respite for myself in what's a very stressful 2-3 weeks period and just rebalance, because again, where do you find that outlet for your own self? So I'd probably pick one of those as a more recent one, more recent probably being like, as a CTO when I went through it. The other one was more as a someone who's just starting to lead teams or has a few years of experience leading teams. And the other thing I learned was the power of collaboration again, and colleagues, and influencing peers and actually delegating to them as well and feeling comfortable doing that, not taking it as a sign of weakness, but actually saying, hey, I'm just going to go focus on this bit. Are you happy to run these things for me? And could you at these points check in with me, etc. I go only as this far, but not so far. And being very clear about it. And actually, the minute you ask for help, you put your hand up and say, I'm not going to worry about appearing weak, but just saying, can you help? People are there. They want to help. They're just waiting to be asked. And they usually hesitate to offer because they don't want to be seen as, I'm going to step on your toes. So those would probably, I'd pick that. I think I really grew as a leader and really had moments of reflection on my own leadership style during that crisis moment.
A lot of things in there. I mean, when you are fairly new as a leader or people manager, it's the absence or someone leaving who you do look up to, whose opinion you do value, whose leadership you value, leave suddenly makes you very aware of the impact they have on your own performance, on your confidence, on what you advocate for yourself and so on. So quite significant, but lovely that you're still in touch and you'll still have that connection. It is. I think there's a massive responsibility, isn't there, to your team, to the project, to what you're delivering. There's an emotional investment that happens over time, right? That means that you do have to show up, and sometimes you do have to step up into some really uncomfortable spaces, and you don't know how this is supposed to flow, how this is supposed to work, right? But I also heard you asking for help, and time again, it's the one thing I hear leaders really struggle with. Even the most senior leaders struggle with, first of all, determining and accepting that they need help, and then asking for it, because it feels like an admittance of weakness or inability to deliver. So there's a self-judgment that happens there. When actually, if you reframe it the way you did, which was, I have a responsibility to the team, and I'm going to be more successful if I can make this collaborative, if I can ask for help. And so people do want to help. I mean, that's, they want a part in it. They are very willing to do that, especially if you've got a good culture and high trust levels from within the team. So yeah, that skill I can't emphasize enough. In the same way that we need to learn to perhaps say no more often, we also need to learn to ask for help more often as well.
And it still feels uncomfortable. Like, sure, I learned to do it. It still feels uncomfortable. I do it more often now, but yeah, I guess there's that own personal thing, right, where you still do things, and you've just got to do it enough and enough and enough till it becomes a habit, and that's good. And you still feel uncomfortable. It still feels unfamiliar. You still go through the emotions that you go through, and that's also okay. Like, it's just accepting that as a part of it as well, and not beating yourself up about it, and just saying, actually, invest in the actual outcome. We got it done well. And ultimately, that's what matters. But yes, I think, again, generally, I think society has these deeply cultured visions and shapes of what leadership looks like and stuff. And I think, unfortunately, that being strong and not feeling like you can ask for help or not exhibiting vulnerability seems to be one of those. And I think we can all take little steps towards bringing that down a little bit.
I agree. And talking about discomfort, not to say that it's uncomfortable per se, but how you mentioned at the beginning, you're transitioning back into coming back from maternity leave. Yeah. Would you share a little bit more about that journey of being a mum and a CTO?
It's hard, is a short answer, but it's also good. So good part of it is that I feel, and again, as much as I love my children and I love spending time with them, with both my children, I found after a few months, I was getting to that point where I was missing work, as missing the adult conversations, as missing the time away from them professionally. And I realized that the minute I even took a few hours a day to just focus on work and actually did meaningful work, I was a lot more present with my children. So yes, there's always guilt. There's the mom guilt, there's the professional guilt, there's the family guilt. Guilt has a lot of labels, and they all apply and they don't go away. No matter what you do, no matter how much you console yourself, it's there. It's about learning to live with it. It's about, again, trusting your close network to actually look after your child. They may not look after them as well as you do. Nobody can replace mom, but it's about trusting them, building the right sort of systems in place so that should some systems or levels get breached somewhere, you immediately get notified and get called, and you get told about it, and you can intervene before something really bad happens. But then the advantage of that is that you're more present with your children, at least I am. I know when now my older one comes back from school, she doesn't even know I've been working for the last 6 hours, 7 hours. And she just sees me a lot more engaged and a lot more present and a lot more interactive. And hopefully the baby feels the same as well, but it is still hard. And the thing that really does get lost in all of this, well, there are two things that get lost. One is your own time and things that you do for yourself for pleasure. And then the other thing sometimes ends up being the amount of time you spend with your spouse or your family doing things that you would have done. But again, it's about, I think, knowing that it's temporary. Kids aren't that small forever. They grow up, they become more independent. You start getting those parts of your life back as well in a different way, but you do get it. But yes, it's hard. And I think what makes it a little bit easier is working with individuals who accept and acknowledge that it's hard for a parent, not necessarily just moms. I think dads have it just as bad. But as parents transitioning back to work and finding that balance. And if they can go a step further to be a bit more flexible or be a bit more considerate in their communication with you or collaboration with you, I think that goes a long way towards easing some of these different tensions that then exist. And I really want to call out organizations. Again, they know, if they're listening to it, they know who they all are, who are very supportive. And I encourage the others to try and be that supportive as well, because you've really got a lot of good talent that is currently raising a young family. And if we can tap into it, we can genuinely be a lot more productive.
Yes, it is messy having raised 3 children myself, and all I've worked always through that. Perhaps if I was doing it again, I might do it slightly differently, but I still feel that urge you talked about that stimulation of your capability, your creativity, your thinking at an adult level keep you buoyant, right? It keeps you fulfilled in yourself, right? And satisfied to an extent. Because if you haven't looked after yourself in that way and you need it, then it's very hard to be present. Your mind will always be somewhere else, right? And I think the sound advice about having, plans if something falls through, and then plan B and plan C, right? As part of how you manage things practically, I think is really valuable advice, because things do happen. Little ones get sick, right? And that can have a domino effect in the whole family.
Yes.
And they're prone to it. They're little beings, right? They're picking up all kinds of germs and so on, and generously spreading them to everyone else.
Yes.
And those things, those things that happen, and they are your priority. They're the people you're going to respond to, because we've brought them into the world, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's an important job as well as
Absolutely.
wanting to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Abs-
understanding, I think, is wonderful. I think I concur. I think organizations that see the value of parents who are juggling a lot, and in fact, they're incredibly good at making really good decisions very fast, because that gets sharpened in you, right? As
yes.
being a parent. You have to do those things, or there are consequences that come back on you. So that's a really valuable skill to bring into our teams, right?
100%. And only a parent learns that through it's a trial by fire, isn't it? Especially as you've just said, the whole how quickly can you get something organized and how quickly can you decide what's important and what's not and just move on. I think a parent just does it intuitively. And again, I say parent, and yes, mothers learn it the hard way, but I think so do dads, because they're also in a very similar boat. And yes, it's very important. I think, again, companies just need to value those skills a lot more. An interesting thing I read or heard somewhere was that actually, especially mums who've been a mom for about 15, 20 years are probably the best leaders you could have for running a company, because they are just their organizational skills, their prioritization skills, their budget management skills have been honed for so many years, absolutely in the crunch, in the front line, that if you could choose one good CEO, you want someone who's raised a family of 2 or 3 and done it. And they're your best ones.
Beautifully put. Thank you for that. Fantastic. Aditi, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. And thank you for joining me. There's so much here that I hope listeners kind of take note of, or experiment with, or steal, or whatever, to make their journeys richer, right?
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, Sam. I've enjoyed all our conversations and I really love this one as well. So thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. Thank you for such a lovely exploration today, Aditi. I really, really enjoyed it. So, are you subscribed to the Leaders Who Coach podcast yet? I would love and appreciate you following the podcast. If coach leadership or coaching skills as a leader is something you wish for yourself, do check out the links, the playlist, and make Leaders Who Coach a regular thing for you. You can also start your journey by downloading the Leaders Who Coach app in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store, where you can complete the foundation module absolutely free. All you have to do is just download the Leaders Who Coach app. And a quick tip for you, do check the website, coachlead.co, for periodic offers and discounts on the Leaders Who Coach self-paced program. So once you're into the app, there you can discover your personal values, uncover your blind spots, and learn more about coach leadership, about how coaching skills can make you more influential, build the trust that Aditi's talked about and shared, build that capability with your team and grow them, and how you can enjoy leading your teams with way less heavy lifting. That's the Leaders Who Coach Foundation free section. See you there or here on the Leaders Who Coach podcast next time.